So good morning and welcome to day 2 of the Technology Association of Oregon's Digital Health Week. We're excited to continue our conversations focused on healthcare technology with today's International Roundtable. And we're going to feature health companies from Oregon, some of the leading healthcare companies here in the ecosystem, as well as a number of leading health companies from Israel. And should be a good discussion. We'll have 2 different panels and time for some Q&A as well. I would like to encourage everyone who's in attendance, if you have questions you'd like to be considered or answered by the panelists, please feel free to throw those into the chat as we go. I'm Skip Newberry, President and CEO of the Technology Association of Oregon, and I'm joined this morning by Riley O'Brien, who's our VP of Events and Experiences. She'll be providing some back-end Zoom support. A couple of rules of engagement before we get started. All participants have been muted, so please remain on mute unless a member of the staff calls on you. And you may ask or respond to questions in the chat, publicly or privately, by directing your message to me or to Riley, who's under the name Special Events, that's her code name. We'll monitor the chat box and respond throughout the discussion. We also ask you to please engage via the participant icon on your screen. And also, of course, encourage you all to participate via social media as well throughout the day and during the session as well. We'd love to share what's happening at TAO and to get your takeaways on the event. Please join us at 11 a.m. for a conversation today on human-centered design as well, featuring Noah with Evolve Collaborative, and tomorrow at 9 a.m. for innovation in healthcare delivery models. So that should also be a good discussion. A big thank you to Link Oregon, OHSU, and OBI, to HIMSS Oregon, to the Israel Consul General of the Pacific Northwest, and also OCHSU for underwriting Digital Health Week. We couldn't do this without their support and their sponsorship, and we're excited to explore some topics with you all throughout the week. Finally, it's my pleasure to introduce Shlomi Kofman, he's the Consul General for Israel to the Pacific Northwest, and he's going to say a few words, and then we're going to get into the panel discussions. Shlomi.
Thank you, Skip, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first Israel-Oregon Roundtable that will focus on the healthcare sector. And Skip, I hope that this is the first one, but there are many more to come in the future. So again, I want to start by thanking Skip and his team for creating this amazing opportunity and helping us to bring the Israeli and Oregonian healthcare communities together. Our 2 states and 2 industries have strong connections over many years and that we wish to strengthen and flourish. By the end of 1990, Israel was home to more than 200 life science companies. With steady growth over the last decade, with some 80 new companies formed each year, Israel has introduced creativity and innovation into the field. Today, with over 1,500 active companies, Israel is leading the forefront of medical innovation and helping to save lives across the globe. In a relatively short period of time, more than 40% of these companies started to expand and generate revenues. Israel's innovative environment created opportunities for startups to become advanced, commercially viable, and promising global companies. In 2018 alone, Israel life science exports reached $8.5 billion. Over 70% of those companies are in the medical devices and digital health sector. In the medical device arena, Israel's scientists and engineers have integrated advanced technologies in electronics, communication, and many other fields, including early diagnostics, smart surgical equipment, and more. Over 600 medical device exporters engage in a variety of medical applications. The COVID-19 era brought many challenges to both our communities, but also created incredible opportunities to deliver better healthcare services to patients at the comfort of their homes through any web or mobile device, all without requiring the presence of a healthcare provider. For billions of people around the world who need medical assistance in these troubling times, the growing telemedicine sector created new possibilities to improve healthcare service access and quality of life. Furthermore, Israeli scientists and entrepreneurs are working together on new solutions to help people around the world to adapt to new realities and find new medical applications to deal with virus threats. We hope that our roundtable today, with 3 Israeli companies and many Oregonian companies, will initiate conversations, share knowledge, and cultivate partnerships. We hope to use this platform for future collaboration, bring more Israeli innovation to Oregon, and bring Oregonian health solutions back to Israel. On our agenda, we have 6 incredible companies on both sides who will share their stories, successes, and challenges. All are leaders in their fields and working together to create a better world for us. Again, thank you for joining, thank you for your time, and thank you for building this community and organizing this event. Thank you so much. And good luck.
Thank you, Shlomi. So first up, we have a few different folks from the Oregon digital health ecosystem. We have Matthias Merkel, who's the Senior Associate Chief Medical Officer at Oregon Health and Science University. We also have Mohan Nair, who's the Senior Vice President and Chief Innovation Officer, for Canby Health Solutions. And then also Jeff Olson, who is the Interim Vice President, IS Technology and CTO for Legacy Health. And first up, we have Matthias. He's going to give a little bit of an introduction about his background and some of the work that they're doing at OHSU. And then we'll shift to Mohan next. Matthias?
Hello, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. My background is I'm an anesthesiologist and intensivist, and in my leadership role, I manage the capacity and inpatient flow across our health system. And I want to walk you a little bit through this, sharing a few slides. So how we went from whiteboard to digital and what this helped us. So what you can see here is a snapshot of a day in 2016, October 12th. We managed our capacity constraints, sort of an imbalance of how many patients needed inpatient admission into our health system and how many beds we had available on a piece of paper and on a whiteboard. So we collected all the data, somebody wrote it on the board. You can see here what our inpatient centers like critical care, acute care, ED, and everything looks like. And then it went up something like this, and I just highlighted what we wrote there as action item. We closed the ED for ambulances. We reduced acceptance through our transfer center and kind of maintained our openness as a level 1 trauma center, which we share with Legacy to kind of serve the entire Pacific Northwest for that. The most common action item was, let's meet again at 2:45 and see how bad it really became. We did this for several weeks and then kind of recognized this is not getting us somewhere, and like doing it over and over again and expecting a different outcome is also a definition of insanity. So we moved into the new arena. Like, so December 2017, we moved from this paper to a digital platform. This is an EGE technology, which we partnered with them and fine-tuned it for our health system. Essentially here you can see sort of a snapshot. We have 3 hospitals, our academic center, and then Hillsborough Medical Center and Adventist. It's part of our health system. It shows you the type of bed. It shows you how many we have here, how many beds available, how many are blocked and not readily available. It shows you also our women's and children's hospital. This is updated in real time. No extra step is needed. It's really done with any documentation we do in our EMR, the nursing staff, the patient placement office, and we get this. We also enhanced other technology. This is a map snot of the state of Oregon. And you can see here, like on that day here on November 10th, we had several patients accepted in our transfer center. And then if you hover over this, it shows you a lot of details, like which hospital it is, what type of bed they asked for, when they were accepted, how far they are to our different hospitals, how long it will take by road or fixed wing or ambulance drive. This really allows us to manage our health system much more effectively. And this is our success story for this. So again, I said we started from 2016. We had to decline a lot of patients. This is a bar graph, shows you the total number over a 12-month period here in our health system. Each bar is a year, and you can see we achieved a gradual decline. Now you would say, okay, this just means you got more restrictive, but like at the same time, we substantially increased the total number of accepted transfer in our health system. So this together equals like we have built a 20-bed unit by using digital and connecting human people more effectively around that. So that was really helpful. And then the pandemic came. And it kind of really struck me that, like, you know, how can we avoid things we have seen in other states and areas in our country around the world where, like, hospitals are completely overrun with COVID patients, but still have other patients. So this is where we kind of created this idea, could we make the entire state as one health system for the purpose of managing this crisis? So we used the same principle we have in our mission control and connected like these critical access hospitals who have like often like less than 25 beds and an emergency room, community hospitals in the 50 to 150 bed range, and health systems like Legacy, Providence, Kaiser, Peace Health, and OHSU. All of them agreed to share data into our data set. This is really kind of just, is a bed occupied and not, and what type of bed it is. And then we can kind of put it out in a way that you can either look at it at a desktop on any smart device or in our physical mission control. And it's sorted by the entire state, to region, to hospital systems, to hospital, to the individual unit. So like this allows us to have similar granular data information. And this is a snapshot again from earlier November. It's busy, but it shows you like the depth of the data. These are like many data points every 5 minutes updated, and give us a real-time representation what's going on in the state, and allows us to use this to manage the COVID and non-COVID demand into the inpatient settings. And this technology has really helped us, and we were able, from the idea mid-March to having it live in like 4 weeks. That was really all hand on decks making it happen. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions afterwards. But like, and this is kind of in the background here, a little bit of a snapshot how it looks in real in our Mission Control Center, where we have a big wall with all of these data sets. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for that. That was an excellent overview and really cool solution to a problem that I know a lot of health systems face. So next up, we have Mohan. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Skip. Thank you, all of our friends here on the internet. My story is not going to be as focused as Matthias's story, which is very, very impressive. Mine is more about the relationship between the innovations that can really bring about solutions for the long term for both our countries. The most important thing for us is to, for me right now, is to frame, if I can attempt to frame the climate of innovation that we can see in Cambia, so that you can use your own minds to find sources of connections that can create acceleration and innovation for both our regions. Cambia's story is needed, so I'm not going to boast. I'm more going to talk to you about how it forms, so that history can actually not repeat itself and actually become bolstered. We formed in Tacoma, Washington, when 12 logging families gathered together 100 years ago to understand how they could collect their dollars and pay for care. Those logging families were working in very dangerous times 100 years ago. And when one logger fails, the whole family of loggers have challenges. That root of putting monies together to establish a common identity and a common way in which we want to interact with the healthcare system started 100 years ago and began the insurance model, the whole idea of pay for insurance, where they collected together and they custodian it. That route turned into Pierce County Medical, and then turned into Regents Blue Cross Blue Shield after we combined multiple regional Blue Cross Blue Shields to form a family of companies known as Cambia today. And Cambia is about 25 companies, of which 6 Blue Cross and Blue Shield entities are engaged. And 17 years ago, we got together and asked a deeper question. Are we sufficiently completing the promise we have to consumers and their families? Is the institutional relationships between members of the healthcare system sufficiently satisfying and developing the solutions necessary for the desktop of our consumers to literally be one of peace and success? And the answer is no. Clearly, families are challenged with pricing and costs of the healthcare system. The alpha is skyrocketing and continues to skyrocket. People are going bankrupt because of healthcare costing. And the system has not sufficiently delivered its promise of helping all with the best we can offer. I know that all of us are trying our best. All of us are finding ways to solve that problem. And the ecosystem has to come together in a very strong way to engage a solution. If not, we are hitting a cliff, if not already hit the cliff. Now, Cambia as a company decided to grow with a purpose statement that is called a cause statement, which I had the pleasure of formulating with the company early on in 17 years ago. The cause is basically to identify us not as the center of anything, but to be the frame and to catalyze the relationship between the healthcare system to make it more person-focused and family-focused rather than institutional focused. And the second is to find a way to make it economically sustainable, both at the system level and also at the dining table level. And all those promises have yet to be satisfied. And we are taking a journey for the last 17 years to take ourselves out of the picture, except to fund our own activities to transform the system. Hence the not-for-profit for the last 100 years and tax-paying as well. That unique position we have as an institution set is to find the recipe to give an example to others, but not to boast as being the example to others, but to form a way in which we can sort of in the Northwest transform the world's identity towards healthcare. Now, what are the engines that we are looking at in the innovation space? As I ran the health plans and ran marketing as an executive at Regence Blue Cross Blue Shield for a period of 7 years, and then moved to the innovation officer role, where now I'm the innovation officer for all of Cambia's 25 plus companies. We decided to create a couple of engines. One is the system of record that you all know of in Blue Cross Blue Shield is literally the claims-oriented record. It's the machinery that makes sure that when you are going to the doctor or to the physicians or to any other institutional member, you get paid through the system. And it is covered through our machinery that is an obligation to pay. That, of course, has very different system of record views, and the efficiency and the effectiveness of that can be acknowledged by every one of you. That's what's needed. We have about 700 engineers who are working towards establishing the consistency for all 4 states. Then there's the idea of consumerism and the idea of bringing the consumer into the picture rather than being a victim of the story and the narrative of the institutional dialogue, but bringing the consumer into understanding analytics about their health, understanding how they can engage the system in the most effective way, and in some ways, be the center of gravity and focus of the system. We had to convert our company from an institutional dialogue to a consumer-based dialogue and ask deeper questions about how our innovations are impacting that consumer and that family. And the power of having 2 million consumers in our customer base is that we can always engage them, and we have continued to engage them over the years. Building products that face transparency, that allow for cost and performance to be viewed, that allows people to look at their drugs that they're taking and find efficacy in them, the truth within the truth, and allowing them to be the leaders of their own destiny in terms of choice and affecting the ecosystem with respect to data is where we've been pursuing the work for the last 17 years. And we have produced multiple companies and invested in multiple companies that allow for that data store of consumer, not data store of claims, to be as valuable as the other. Echo Health System is one of our investments. We have invested about 100 million plus in the last 2+ years, and we are the fastest growing corporate investment organization in the US, investing in several startups that show promise to complete the promise of the cause that we have declared. The difference between Echo Health Ventures, which is one of our institutions, is that it's a joint venture between us and North Carolina Blues. And we have continued to invest and continue to evaluate what is important for transforming the economy as we see today, from an institutional focus to a person focus, and then absolutely touching the dining table of our consumers. And what does it take to make that happen while we're keeping our system of record very powerful and growing, which is necessary, but also creating an infrastructure that is as important as a consumer infrastructure. We've invested significantly in a product line and a service line called Journey, which is a platform of choice that observes the journey a consumer takes versus the journey a consumer has to take when they join our journey in the healthcare system. When you get sick, you join a journey that you don't understand. You get confused. And it's almost like it's a challenge for human beings to actually go through the healthcare system in the US today. But finding their journey and then establishing their journey to link to the necessary activities in healthcare is what we are working towards. And Journey is one of the products that we are pushing forward with heavy investment. Then the other engine is the one that I run, which is called the Innovation Force. It's a group of 12, ironically, the same 12 loggers, I guess, 12 individuals that is focused on fundamentally transforming the system through leaps. We've produced 5 products in the last 7 years, and those products have turned into companies. We have launched those companies internally, and they are purpose-built companies that we own and operate. The energy of building companies within the infrastructure, within the ecosystem, gives us the humility necessary to understand the work that you all do as entrepreneurs. And the energy we understand gives us an intellectual honesty about working with startups and working with ecosystem partners. Plus, it also energizes our own company in entrepreneurship. A long time ago, 10 years ago, when we surveyed our employees, only 30% said that their boss and their company leadership was innovative and engaged in innovation. Right now, we're 86% and have consistently been 86% for the last 3 to 4 years. And the IBM benchmark shows in those questions of engagement, on average, about 55%. So we're above the benchmark, but that does not mean we're above the benchmark in using this flywheel of innovation internally, idea generation internally, investment externally in companies, consumer focus, and then also, of course, keeping our system of record in service of the institutions that we all speak about in the hospitals and doctors. That's our story. And the key that I would ask us to consider, I know you're going to ask me questions like, what are the techs that really spur innovation now? And those are powerful questions. And I can tell you that we're deploying almost all of the technologies that we can think of, but we want to make sure that it's a safe technology and it applies to consumers, and that engagement is the number one thing we're looking for, is consumers participating in the system. We can build systems of record, and we do invest in systems of record, and investments in that are significant. But the thing that I'm really most focused on is, how do I get a consumer, a family, your family, to actually engage with the system and feel anchored in the strength of their knowledge and being able to transform the system one family at a time. And that's what I would be most interested in participating and sharing in, apart from the usual roles of system of record work that we will engage in.
Thank you, Mohan. And next up, we have Jeff from Legacy Health.
There we go. Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Thanks. Hi, everybody. This is Jeff Wilson. Quick background: 20 years in healthcare IT. I've worked for both a software vendor and healthcare, and then the last 15 years working for a number of providers. I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of leadership roles in healthcare IT, business intelligence, service delivery, project management, infrastructure, and now the interim VP of technology at Legacy. I just wanted to start with Oregon. I really think that our location between the Bay Area and Seattle is an advantage. The size of Portland specifically, for me, is perfect. We get to enjoy all the things of a city, but also within a hour plus, we can be skiing, which I love to do on the weekends, or go to the beach. I think Intel's presence, Nike's push. I mean, I think what I've read is Nike considers himself a technology company now. It's pretty exciting. I think we have a pretty good story to tell. Legacy specifically, it's a locally run organization, which I'm proud of. We're small enough to be fairly agile in healthcare space, but also large enough to take some risks technically. And we're pushing a lot of digital projects forward quickly right now. So it's really an exciting time to work for this organization. I just wanted to cover 3 priorities that are on my mind and my seat in my role currently, coming from a provider and a technical standpoint. Number 1 is just really modernizing our applications and being quicker. Our healthcare, especially in the hospital space, the applications are very what I call heavy. Some people would say technical debt, written on old code, requiring a lot of infrastructure and very slow. Really to push our vendors, because typically we don't create a lot of our own applications, we buy, pushing them to be cloud ready, cloud native, using PaaS or SaaS, platform as a service, software as a service, and not having to buy all this hardware to run. Legacy made a big move about a year, well, it was a 3-year project to get out of our data center and get to the cloud as much as possible. And we really had a lot of problems with our vendors, not ready, not willing to support us. And we achieved about 25% of our applications, but we were hoping for 50%, to be honest. And with that is just automating both business processes and our infrastructure. We're really going to push in the next couple of years to automate. The second priority is just APIs. Our systems, we have well over 200 applications just within our house. We also, of course, have a lot of partners in the community that we share data with. And as a patient, more and more, there's going to be opportunities to download your data to your iPhone and all that. And the government's really regulating that right now. And so APIs between systems is a huge thing. Even today, if you're registered at a legacy hospital, your data is immediately sent to scores and scores of systems, but it's really limited as to what's shared. Demographics, orders, lab results. It's pretty limited, and there's definitely not full integration. Definitely an emerging area in our space, and definitely something we're working on and extremely excited about, really. The final thing is I have to talk about cybersecurity, and it really ties to Legacy's goal of being a safe place to deliver care. Healthcare data is valuable. As you probably saw in the news, entire health systems have been under attack. I think up to 6 organizations have been locked out with ransomware in October. So it's definitely something that keeps me up at night. We have a large user base that's about 50% employees and 50% non-employees. So when you think about that, a lot of organizations, typically have to worry about their employees. We have to worry about the entire community providers, volunteers, and it's just a large, diverse, user ecosystem to manage and secure. So moving forward, cybersecurity will continue to be in my our radar as a huge priority. So yeah, those are the 3 priorities. Just how do we get faster and more nimble and more automated? How do we have better APIs between our systems, and then always keeping cybersecurity in the forefront? So thank you.
Excellent, thanks, Jeff. And I think across the folks from the Oregon digital health ecosystem, you can see some themes emerging around sort of a patient-centric focus, trying to figure out ways to navigate some of the complexity of all the various systems and companies and units all connecting and intersecting in order to deliver effective care. And of course, a grounding in sort of the values or mission of improving people's lives, keeping them safe and connected through technology. So we're going to shift now to some of the folks from Israel, and then we'll do a moderated Q&A involving the entire group. That'll be an interesting challenge for me with 6 panelists, but I think we can do it. Done it before. And I want to encourage folks as well in the audience, if you haven't already and you have some questions you'd like folks to respond to, feel free to throw those in the chat. If we don't get to them by the end of the hour, I will take it upon myself to follow up with folks and see if we can get some quick little snippets of responses that we can share back out with folks. So next up, we have from Israel, a whole host of interesting digital health tech companies. We're going to start with Shani Toledano, who's the CEO at HT Bioimaging, And then from there, we're going to get into a discussion from Stratasys with Scott. And then finally, Maya is going to take us home with the diagnostic robotics. So Shani, the floor is yours.
Thank you. All right. So, hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Shani Toledano. I'm the co-founder and CEO of HD Bioimaging. The main worldwide health challenge is cancer, with number of cases constantly rising from 14 to 18 in 4 years. 45% of cancer patients do not survive because their cancer was detected too late. This is a global challenge we all must face. Doctors do not have all the necessary tools and data they need to see cancer at the point of care and in the operation room, where it can be different between life and death. Because they are already there and they are looking at the tissue, but they can't see what they can't see. Early detection is the key factor in saving lives. I founded the company after my father passed away from cancer that was detected very late. And we are here, HD Bioimaging, to help doctors not miss cancer with a new imaging modality that is highly accurate, safe, and produces an immediate results on the spot. Our technology is the first imaging based on heat diffusion. What we do is we are sending a heat wave to the tissue. Cancer and normal tissue transfer the heat differently. We can read that signal and translate it into an image on the spot so treatment can begin. Let's see an example. So this is one of our tested patients. Its tongue looks normal. We heated up the tongue. Now we are measuring the heat diffusion through the tissue, and here is our image that shows a confirmed cancer that we couldn't see by naked eye. It's about 180 million annual procedures in the United States alone. Our system will be used at the point of care for early detection and biopsy navigation, for the gynecologist to detect cervical cancer, head and neck, skin cancer, lymph node cancers, colon cancer, prostate, and in the operation rooms for surgery navigation, cancer detection, and safe margin detection. We have completed 100 patient clinical trial in Israel and the United States, and we achieved extremely high accuracy in detecting cancer. And while we are still 2 years far from the FDA approval, we are preparing mass production and sales for the veterinarians to detect cancer in dogs and cats. So this application does not require any FDA approvals, so we can start and go and generate revenues in the market before having the FDA. So this is the company's strategy. So, and just to conclude, so we currently have 3 activities in the company. The first one is vet revenues next year, next June. Then we have the point of care in human oncology, which we are running clinical trials in the United States. We have about 2 years for the first FDA 510K de novo approval. Huge potential for, again, point of care and primary care cancers. And last one is the intraoperative surgery tool that is currently under R&D in vivo studies. And for the team, so our team includes the best people in their field: oncologists, radiologists, AI and deep learning experts, heat transfer and thermodynamics experts, computer vision, and one successful serial entrepreneur, Gideon Barak, my co-founder. But over and above our business, science, and technical skills, we are driven by the ideology to reduce number of deaths caused by cancer. We have our A round that is currently open, and if you find it interesting to talk, I would love to further discuss. So please feel free to reach out to me, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Shani. Next up, we have Scott from Stratasys.
Thanks, Skip. And I believe somebody on your end is going to be putting my slides up on the screen. Otherwise, I can share as well.
I think it'd be easier if you were to share. So go for it.
Oh, just give me 1 second.
Oh, okay. There's the code name again. Riley O'Brien, codename Special Events.
So thanks, Skip. I appreciate the introduction. And while Riley is getting everything up and running, just do a quick introduction on myself. My name is Scott Trakakis. I am the healthcare segment leader for Stratasys. And so we are dual headquartered in Rehovot, Israel, as well as in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, which is a suburb of Minneapolis. So the way that Stratasys defines healthcare within our segment is medical device companies, hospitals, and then our dental division as well. And so I have the privilege of overseeing all three of those divisions. If you go to the next slide, a little bit about Stratasys as well. We're not a startup. Within the healthcare ecosystem, I would say that we relatively are. While we've been in additive manufacturing for over 30 years, where we've really seen the adoption within the point of care or patient-specific industry for 3D printing, has really kind of stepped up, I'd say, in the last 3 to 5 years. But as far as Stratasys is around, we have 150,000 plus installations within all of our currently verticals. So we are the world's largest and most widely used 3D printing technology. But one of the things that I think that we're most proud of is what type of innovation has occurred specifically within the healthcare space. So if you go to the next slide, what I typically like to talk about in a presentation like this is how hospitals are using 3D printing. Now, that in and of itself is a 45 to a 60-minute presentation. And I think Skip would prefer that I not focus on a 45-minute presentation. So in the interest of time, I'm going to talk about why hospitals are using 3D printing. So it ultimately, if you go to the next slide, it really comes down to 3 elements. The first one is clinical evidence. The second one are economics. And then tertiary is awareness. So if I focus on the first 2 for just a moment and talk about the clinical evidence, there's more and more evidence showing how 3D printing improves surgical outcomes, how it improves patient satisfaction, how it improves outcome, how it increases awareness for consent. Mohan was talking earlier about, do patients understand the procedures that they're about to go through? And so really where 3D printing has found a niche is just making sure that that awareness is there, that informed consent is appropriate. And whether we're talking about a neurosurgical application or a surgical oncology application, ultimately the patients do not have medical backgrounds. And so really trying to use this as a tool to improve that patient satisfaction and awareness is one of the primary benefits, in addition to the clinical outcomes as well as the economic benefits. You know, you see here about reduced operating time. One of the things that the Radiological Society of North America and the American College of Radiology are focusing on is how do we quantify the actual benefits of 3D printing, so that ultimately it drives then to the economics of reimbursement. There's currently a category 2 or a category 3 CPT codes for reimbursement, but there's a registry ongoing right now for 2,000 patients that is sponsored by the Radiological Society of North America, as well as the American College of Radiology, to create that data point so that, one, it can show the value that it brings, but also it shows the widespread use. And then in our current environment with COVID, 3D printing has really been a spotlight for 3D printing applications. Things such as personal protective equipment, things such as nasopharyngeal or mid-terminate swabs for COVID testing are, again, just a few of the applications that we've seen over the past, I'd say, six months or so. If you go to the next slide, it also talks about just the data. And so I mentioned the 2,000 patient registry that is currently ongoing. It's being done around the United States and up in Canada. But again, it's ultimately trying to quantify what is the value. And so showing that widespread use is a primary driver of going from a CPT category 3 code to a category 1 code. So going to the next slide is just an example of how the registry is trying to quantify that value. So in this case, this is a single application of how 3D printing is used in craniomaxillofacial applications, but using 2 models. The first one is just an anatomical model for visualization, for the surgeons to prepare, to work with the patients so that they ensure that they understand what the procedure is. And then the second model is the actual surgical guide that is used in the operating suite to actually ensure that the appropriate cuts and guidelines are used appropriately. So as you can see here, almost an hour or just over an hour of savings. And then we all know that regionally, operating room time varies. However, we know that it isn't inexpensive. So being able to quantify the value from an indirect perspective, a cost avoidance perspective, is also something that is getting more and more attention. So this is more on the economic side. But I also want to focus on the third one. And if you go to the third slide, we just talk about awareness in general. And so any general Google search will show you how the largest healthcare institutions in the world are using 3D printing. Just in the last 3 to 4 weeks, you can look up Seattle Children's and they can talk about how they're using 3D printing to improve surgical outcomes, to improve patient satisfaction, patient consent, but also just looking at it from a competitive perspective as well. You talk about, the innovation and differentiation that is happening amongst healthcare institutions. So today in the United States, there are approximately 200 to 300 healthcare systems that are using 3D printing. Now, out of 6,000 plus hospitals in the United States, that's a very small amount. However, Gardner Research is also saying that approximately 30 to 40% of hospitals in the next 12 months will be using 3D printing as part of their surgical approach. Now, this isn't for all procedures, but again, it's identifying where those more complex congenital heart defect procedures, surgical oncology, neurosurgery, craniomaxillofacial, plastic surgery type application procedures can benefit from utilizing 3D printing. Lastly, just some of the newer, technology specific to Stratasys on what we've come out with is, if you go to the next slide, is really trying to quantify biomechanically how these 3D printed materials compare to native tissue, compare to native bone. So that when we say that we're trying to get into clinical trials and that we want our customers, our hospitals, our medical device companies to be able to actually do surgical interventions in a preparation perspective, that they're using these materials and being able to quantify how they compare to what they will actually see when they're operating on the patient. And so we're working with academic medical centers around the United States to ultimately quantify what it means that when we do a cardiac procedure, how does it compare to what they would expect to see in the surgical suite? When we're doing an orthopedic implant, how does that compare from a haptic perspective? Just total biomechanical accuracy across the board so that we can use a digital format to replicate what we would expect to see for comorbidities from each patient. So again, it's just trying to take the data that is currently in each surgeon's head and broadly scale it across the industry to improve surgical outcomes, to improve clinical outcomes, to improve economics for the entire healthcare industry. So I will stop there, but if there's any questions, this presentation will be available as well as my contact information. So look forward to having additional conversations at the Q&A.
Thank you, Scott. And last but not least, we have Maya, and then we'll get into a couple of questions to round us out.
Great, thanks, Skip. Can you enable me to share the screen?
I just made you a co-host.
Thank you. Great, so hi everyone, very nice to meet you all. So I'm Maya and I'm the VP Strategy and Operations of Diagnostic Robotics. So a little bit about our company. We are a team of above 100 data scientists, engineers, physicians, developing predictive analytics in order to address the most critical clinical and financial challenges in healthcare. And a little bit about the team. So the founders are Jonathan Amir, our CEO, Dr. Kira Radinsky, our CTO and co-founder, which was a former chief scientist of data scientist in eBay, Israel, and Professor Moshe Shoam, who IPO'd several companies, including Mazor Robotics that was recently sold to Medtronic. On the medical advisory board, so we're working with a broad network of physicians, from some listed here from Harvard, Stanford, and Mayo Clinic. So a little bit about how we've built our models. So we're relying on a lot of different types of data with over 4 million visits from ED departments, over 73 million visits from HMOs, relying on the clinical richness of the data that we have here in Israel, and above 60 billion of claims data. We've started building our models in a clinically validated settings, working on our triage system inside the emergency departments. And from there, we've expanded our products to provide a full line of home-based and triage and population health management solutions that I'll share a bit more in depth. So in 2020 alone, we've had 2.4 million patients that have been screened through our system. And I'll share a bit more information on the types of products that we have and what it is that we're trying to solve. So on the AI augmented home-based triage, the first thing that we're addressing is medical setting navigation, which is really trying to steer the patients to the most appropriate provider or site of care navigation that can both streamline the user journey from the patient's perspective, help the health systems and the physicians to focus on the cases that are clinically applicable, and provide substantial cost savings to the health plans due to the difference among different settings. So for example, as you're looking at it in ED with an average visit of $1,500, whereas an urgent care clinic can be an average of $150. The way we've done that is we have 3 layers in order to provide that digital front door. So we're starting with a medical intake questionnaire. On that, we have our layer of clinical AI engine. And on top of that, we have another operative layer that can be customized due to the request of either the health plan or the health system. Another thing that we're tackling is really looking at streamlining the intake process. So what we want to do is essentially automate everything that we can throughout the process in order to help the physicians focus their time on the most meaningful part of the appointment. So essentially minimizing the medical summary and data entry and making sure that the physicians spend their entire time as much as possible on patient-facing activities and diagnosis. So some of our initial results on patients rating. So patient satisfaction is 93, medical quality of 96. And on the clinician side, so actually one of the features that physicians like the most is our multiple language support, in which the patient can answer our questionnaire in Spanish, but the physician can get the medical summary in English. Another area that we're focusing on is really thinking how we can leverage AI in order to improve population health management. So the challenge that we're trying to solve is that the top 5% of the patients are responsible for around 50% of the costs within the US healthcare system. However, out of those 50%, only about a third of them is actually clinical conditions that we believe can be prevented with an intervention up front. So we're trying, unlike traditional population health management, which focus on expected costs, however, there are several components which cannot be accounted for there, and is leveraging a single risk model in order to have multiple interventions, and is not relying on data from previous interventions and their outcome. What we're trying to do is really leverage AI in order to match the right patients with the most appropriate interventions that can make an impact for them, focusing on the members that have the highest risk, but only for preventable medical deterioration, and making sure that our system are constantly evolving as we measure the intervention effectiveness and accuracy, and allowing the health system to optimize its interventions over time. Another work we've done recently around COVID is we've converted our clinical questionnaire to focus on COVID and collaborated with the Israeli Ministry of Health in order to provide daily monitoring of the entire population, providing a digital risk assessment score for COVID. And we've leveraged that and provided that also in Rhode Island, and are now working with additional states in the US. Happy to answer any questions if there's any.
Thank you, Maya. That was great. So we've got about 5 minutes left. I want to be sensitive of people's time, but we've captured a couple of questions in the chat, and we're going to follow up with each of the panelists and see if we can get to those in written form at the very least. And I know I'll commit TAO in our network of both social media and network followers, which numbers over 15,000 people, to get that set of responses out to them in the coming week or so. In the meantime, I want to start with a question, and hopefully Mohan can weigh in here first. But I would love to hear what everyone thinks in terms of how we move forward as a healthcare community when it comes to leveraging technology. There's obviously policy impediments. There are things around bureaucracy and the nature of healthcare enterprise. There's also things around technical systems. If you could comment on one of those things, that would be great, and we'll see how many of the panelists we can get through. Mohan, do you want to start?
I think it starts with most work is done with investigation. You start by investigating a problem that you feel or you have experienced something. A lot of entrepreneurs experience something in their lives, and Shani, you mentioned that as well. And I've had the same experiences that, I had a very close friend die of lung cancer just last week, and it was late detection, right? So I feel for what you're trying to do. I have a great deal of empathy and support for the attempt. So most of us start with investigation because we have been inspired. I start with inspiration. So I want to encourage entrepreneurs and even business leaders. Don't forget that the world of analytics only goes as far as your brain. Your heart can take you farther, and your heart can last you through seasons like we're living through. And combining that, the talent of your heart and the talent of your brain, and producing results that really have direct impact, is where I take away all the pain of institutionalization, right? I mean, we all go through this every day. We all go through the idea of the red blood cells killing the white, the rejections, the ability to, you see something that others don't see, and you want to get to that place. And priorities and budgets and everything else freeze you in play. And after a while, you tire. After a while, you say, why don't I just go along to get along? And that is not your promise as an entrepreneur. Your promise as an entrepreneur is to take away your ego, but to establish your passion and not mistake your ego for passion. And I look for people to work with on a constant basis across nations, across companies that understand the difference between egotistical self-centricity and the passion that takes to really serve a greater cause for people you've never met yet. And if you can do that, you're unstoppable. So my recommendation is more humanistic, not institutional, because that you can read everything you want to read in every book you've ever read and every story you've ever read on how to fight the red blood cells to do what you have to do. But not that I'm implying that I do not like red blood cells. Somebody will send me a note saying red blood cells are very valuable, but I understand that cell biology is very important, all of those in the ecosystem, and actually it's true. But the most powerful thing is where are you centered as an entrepreneur, and where are you as a corporate entrepreneur, and where do you want to get to, and keep that eye pretty focused and use logic as the weapon of choice, but don't be lost in it. I hope that helps.
No, it does, and I think it's a good reminder of how we oftentimes can kind of get down in the weeds on either the technology solutions or the science behind what everyone's doing, and lose sight of the customer, if you will, the reason why everyone's doing this, which is the patient and improved health outcomes. I want to also mention that we have Maya Vardi Shoshani with the Bird Foundation, longtime partner of TAO. Bird is a really interesting vehicle with funding that helps support connections between places like Oregon and Israel around R&D and technology development. She put some information and links in the chat. We've also captured some questions from folks. As I mentioned, we'll commit to following up with each of the panelists to get their thoughts on those, and then we'll publish those responses out broadly, along with a little blurb about each of the different panelists and their companies. And I want to say thank you again to Shlomi and Ron from the Israeli Consulate, awesome partners of ours over the years, and helping to put this specific program together. They've been great to work with. And thank you to the panelists for taking time out of their very busy schedules to join us. We really appreciate it. And then thank you again to our supporters. And then finally, our audience members. We have some great programming coming up later this week and hope you will join us. Again, we have another session today on human-centered design at 11 a.m. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your day or evening in Israel.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.